On his birthday, I gifted him a new car. The next day, he dumped me over text. We need to move on. Thanks for everything. No apologies, no explanations, just 12 words after 4 years together. I stared at my phone, reading those words over and over, wondering if this was some kind of sick joke. My fingers trembled as I tried calling him once, twice, 3 times. Straight to voicemail every time. This couldn't be happening. Just yesterday, he'd hugged me tight as I handed him the keys, his eyes shining with what I thought was love. You're the best thing that's ever happened to me, he'd whispered in my ear. I'll never forget this. And now? Radio silence, except for that cold, clinical message that felt like a slap across my face. I sat on my couch, the one we'd picked out together last spring, trying to make sense of it all. The apartment felt suddenly huge and empty, even though nothing had physically changed since yesterday. My head was spinning with questions. Was it something I said? Something I did? Was the car not good enough? Too good? Did he feel emasculated? I scrolled through our recent texts, looking for clues, warning signs, anything that could explain how we went from planning our future together to this. There was nothing. Just normal everyday conversations. Plans for the weekend. Silly memes. Heart emojis. And then that bomb of a text, destroying everything we'd built. I took a deep breath, wiped the tears from my face, and tried to think rationally. Jason had been acting slightly off lately. More secretive with his phone. Working late more often. Mentioning some new colleague named Amber a bit too frequently. I'd brushed it all off as paranoia, trusting him completely because that's what you do when you love someone, right? I didn't call him again. Instead, I opened my laptop and started checking something I'd been too afraid to even think about before. Call it a gut feeling, or maybe just the shock clearing my head. But suddenly, I needed to know if my instincts had been right all along. What I discovered in the next 2 hours changed everything. And Jason? He had no idea what was coming. Jason and I met at Crawford Media 3 years ago. I was the new marketing coordinator, and he was the charming sales rep who brought donuts to every Monday meeting. His smile could light up a room, and he had this way of making everyone feel special, like they were the only person worth talking to. We clicked immediately. After weeks of workplace flirting, he finally asked me out, and we'd been inseparable ever since. At least that's what I thought. Looking back, the red flags were there from the beginning, waving frantically in my face while I deliberately looked the other way. 6 months in, his rent mysteriously increased, and somehow I found myself covering the difference. Just until my commission comes through, he'd said. That commission never quite covered his expenses, though, did it? Then there was the time his credit card got temporarily suspended due to fraud concerns, and I ended up paying for our entire vacation to Miami. $3,000 on my card that he was going to definitely pay back next month. Next month turned into next year, which turned into never. The pattern became so clear now that I was forced to see it. Jason would complain about something, his ancient laptop slowing down his work, his phone constantly dropping calls, his car making a dangerous rattling noise. And within weeks, I'd find myself solving his problem with my wallet. If you really love me, you'd want me to be safe, he'd say about the car. I'd do the same for you in a heartbeat, he'd claim, though that heartbeat never seemed to come. The car was the biggest investment yet. His 2008 Honda had finally died after months of Jason's increasingly dramatic complaints. I might lose my job if I can't get to client meetings, he'd said, eyes downcast, voice heavy with manufactured worry. Bus schedules are killing my productivity. After weeks of hints and direct comments about the Toyota Camry he'd been eyeing, I caved. I emptied my savings account, $28,000 I'd been carefully setting aside for a down payment on a house, and took out a loan for the rest. All for a man who couldn't even bother to break up with me face-to-face after 4 years. I found the first clue in our shared Netflix account. Strange movies I didn't recognize appeared in the continue watching section. Shows neither of us had mentioned watching. Then I noticed the login locations, some from hotels in cities where Jason supposedly had solo business trips I'd helped finance. My heart raced as I moved on to Instagram, where Jason had always been oddly protective of his phone whenever notifications came through. I didn't have his password, but I remembered his email was still logged in on my tablet from when his phone died last month. The password reset link took seconds to arrive. What I found sent ice through my veins. Dozens of messages from someone named Amber_Davis92. Heart emojis, inside jokes, photos that made me sick to my stomach. Can't wait to see you again, she'd written just 3 days ago. These secret meetings are killing me. When can we stop hiding? My hands shook as I dug deeper. Amber Davis. LinkedIn showed she worked at Jason's company, started about 6 months ago as a sales associate. The timeline matched perfectly with when Jason began working late nights and having more client dinners. I found her Facebook next. Her profile was mostly private, but her header image nearly stopped my heart. A sunset beach photo with a man's arm around her shoulders. Though his face wasn't visible, I recognized Jason's watch, the one I'd given him for Christmas. Then I found it. The smoking gun. A message from Jason to Amber dated 2 weeks ago. She finally took the bait about the car. Birthday present incoming. After that, we're free to go public. Just stick to the plan. Amber's response. Poor girl has no idea. But hey, at least she'll have the satisfaction of being generous one last time. You deserve that car after putting up with her for so long. I felt physically ill. There were more messages, detailed plans about their future together, jokes at my expense, screenshots of my text to Jason where I'd expressed concerns about money that he'd shared with her for laughs. They'd been seeing each other for at least 6 months, plotting, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And I'd walked right into their trap, gift-wrapped in a $28,000 bow. I sat surrounded by printouts of their conversations, screenshots of dates that aligned perfectly with nights Jason was working late, and photos they'd taken together while I was paying my rent. Everything suddenly crystallized with perfect clarity. This wasn't just a man falling out of love. This was calculated, methodical. A long con with me as the mark. The tears stopped abruptly, like someone had turned off a faucet. A strange calm settled over me as I realized what had happened. I hadn't just lost a boyfriend. I'd been scammed by a professional. Every I love you, every promise, every tender moment, all of it had been leading to this payoff. The realization should have crushed me, but instead it straightened my spine. If he thinks he can just take my car and walk away, he's seriously underestimated who he's dealing with, I whispered to my empty apartment. Then it hit me. The car. In my emotional rush to make his birthday special, I'd put the down payment and taken out the loan, but the car was registered in my name. We'd planned to transfer it to him when the paperwork was sorted out, but we hadn't gotten around to it yet. Legally, that Toyota Camry was mine, and I still had the spare key, safely tucked in my desk drawer. I reached for my phone, my mind suddenly crystal clear. First, a call to my bank about the loan status. Then to my insurance company to confirm the policy details. Finally, to my cousin who worked as a paralegal, who confirmed what I already suspected. That car was legally mine, and I had every right to take it back. With each call, my resolve strengthened. Jason thought he'd won, that he'd walk away with a new car and a clean break. He was about to learn how wrong he was. The tracking app was still on Jason's phone, the one I'd installed for safety when he'd taken that road trip to Seattle last year. He'd forgotten all about it, and now it was showing me exactly where my car was. Outside Emilio's, the fancy Italian restaurant downtown where we'd always talked about going for a special occasion but couldn't afford. Apparently, Jason and Amber could afford it just fine now. I ordered an Uber, my hands steady as I entered the destination. The driver, a chatty guy named Miguel, kept trying to make conversation, but I was too focused on formulating my plan to respond with more than one-word answers. My mind was racing through possibilities, consequences, and the look that would be on Jason's face when he realized he wasn't as clever as he thought. Bad date? Miguel finally asked, catching my expression in the rearview mirror. Bad relationship? I corrected. But I'm ending it properly tonight. He nodded knowingly and cranked up the radio for the rest of the ride, giving me the space to think. 20 minutes later, we pulled into the restaurant parking lot. I spotted my car immediately, the shiny new Camry parked near the entrance as if they wanted everyone to see it. Pride goeth before a fall, Jason. I waited in the Uber for a few minutes, watching the restaurant entrance. Through the glass doors, I could just make out Jason and a woman I recognized from social media photos as Amber, sitting at a table by the window. They were laughing, clinking wine glasses, his hand covering hers on the table. The sight should have hurt, but all I felt was cold determination. Need me to wait? Miguel asked, his tone sympathetic. No thanks, I've got a ride home already, I replied, patting my purse where the spare key rested. I paid Miguel and waited until his car disappeared around the corner before approaching the Camry. The restaurant was designed with large windows, giving diners a view of the parking lot. Really just parked cars and a sad-looking decorative shrub. But it also meant I needed to be quick if I didn't want to be spotted. The key fob worked perfectly. The car chirped once as it unlocked, and I slid into the driver's seat, breathing in that new car smell that Jason had been so excited about yesterday. The irony wasn't lost on me. I adjusted the seat, Amber must be taller than me, and checked the glove compartment and center console. Jackpot. 2 airplane tickets to Cabo San Lucas for the coming weekend, Jason and Amber Watson printed in bold on the confirmation. An anniversary getaway, according to the attached note written in flowing feminine handwriting. 6 months. They'd been together 6 months, almost the exact amount of time he'd been working late. I took photos of the tickets with my phone, careful to capture all the details, then placed them back exactly as I'd found them. Next, I checked the trunk, finding an overnight bag already packed with Jason's things, including a framed photo of him and Amber that must have been taken on one of those business trips I'd financed. More evidence, more photos taken. Starting the car, I felt a strange mixture of emotions: vindication, anger, but mostly a sense of reclaiming what was mine. Not just the car, but my dignity. I pulled out of the parking space and drove to the far end of the lot, where I could still see the restaurant entrance but wouldn't be immediately noticeable. Then I wrote a note on the back of the Cabo ticket envelope. The car is registered in my name. Enjoy dinner and your walk home. P.S. I have screenshots of your entire plan to use me. Hope Cabo has good weather this weekend, though you might need to Uber to the airport now. I placed the note under the wiper of Jason's colleague's car, the one I recognized from company gatherings, and then drove home, my heart lighter than it had been in months. The call started exactly 47 minutes later when they presumably finished their entrees and walked out to find no car waiting. First came the angry voicemail. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "That's my car." Then the threatening texts. "This is theft. I'm calling the police if you don't bring it back right now." Then, as reality presumably set in, the tone changed. "Baby, let's talk about this. There's been a misunderstanding." And finally, the desperate plea. "Please, I can explain everything. Amber means nothing to me. It was a mistake." I didn't respond to any of them, but I did forward all the messages to my email for safekeeping. Evidence was evidence, after all. Around midnight, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. Amber, introducing herself in a cold, clipped tone, explaining that Jason had told her everything. Apparently, I was the crazy, possessive ex who couldn't let go, who had manipulated him financially for years. I almost admired the complete reversal of reality. Almost. "The car is in my name," I said simply. "I paid for it. Check the registration if you don't believe me." "He was going to pay you back," she snapped. "Was that before or after you two were planning your Cabo trip in my new car?" The silence on the other end was deeply satisfying. "Might want to ask your boyfriend how many other women he's scamming, Amber. You're not the first, and you won't be the last." I hung up before she could respond. My cousin called an hour later, confirming what I already knew. "The car's legally yours. You've done nothing wrong by taking it back. Keep all those threats and messages, though. If he tries anything, that's harassment." By 3 a.m., I'd changed all my passwords, frozen the credit card Jason had access to, and emailed my landlord to inform him that Jason would be removing his things from the apartment this weekend while I was staying with family. I'd already drafted a payment plan for the car loan. It would be tight, but I could manage it, maybe sell the car later if necessary. Whatever happened, I refused to be a victim in this story any longer. Jason showed up at the apartment the next morning, looking haggard and desperate. I watched through the peephole as he rang the doorbell repeatedly, eventually slumping against the wall when I didn't answer. After about 20 minutes, he left a small box by the door with a note. "I'm sorry. Please talk to me." Inside was a cheap pair of earrings, probably bought from the mall kiosk on his way over. The gesture was so pathetic, so inadequate compared to what he'd done, that I actually laughed out loud. I spent the day methodically removing Jason's presence from my life. His clothes went into garbage bags for him to pick up later. His sentimental items, mostly sports memorabilia and gaming equipment, were packed carefully into boxes, not because he deserved the consideration, but because I refused to stoop to his level. Our photos came down from the walls, leaving behind faded rectangles on the paint. By evening, it looked like he'd never lived here at all. He tried a new approach around dinner time, sending his best friend Mark to talk sense into me. Mark had always been nice enough, if a bit too willing to cover for Jason's occasional disappearances. He seemed genuinely shocked when I showed him the evidence of Jason's deception. "I had no idea," he kept saying, scrolling through screenshots on my phone. "He told us you guys were having problems for months, that you were clingy and financially controlling." He looked up, expression troubled. "He borrowed $300 from me last week for what he claimed was your anniversary gift." "Let me guess, he hasn't paid you back yet?" The way Mark's face fell told me everything I needed to know. Join the club. He owes me roughly $30,000 at this point. Mark left shortly after, apologizing repeatedly for his friend's behavior. Before walking out, he paused. "For what it's worth, I think you're handling this with more class than most people would. I'd have set his stuff on fire." "The night's still young," I replied with a smile that made him laugh nervously. By the next morning, the story had spread through our social circle. My phone was lighting up with messages from mutual friends, most expressing shock and support. A few of Jason's closer friends tried to defend him, suggesting there must be two sides to the story, but they quieted down quickly when presented with the evidence. It's hard to argue with someone's own written words plotting to exploit their partner. Amber called again, her tone completely different this time. Apparently, she'd done some digging and discovered Jason had been borrowing money from her too. Smaller amounts, but it added up. She'd also found text messages to a third woman, someone named Rebecca, with eerily similar romantic promises. We ended up talking for almost an hour, piecing together the timeline of Jason's manipulations like detectives solving a crime. "I feel so stupid," she said, her voice small. "Don't," I told her, surprising myself with the lack of anger I felt toward her now. "He's very good at what he does. Just be glad you found out before he took you for everything." When Jason realized that Amber and I were communicating, he completely changed tactics. He showed up at my workplace with flowers and a handwritten letter, creating such a scene that security had to escort him out. He blew up my phone with increasingly desperate messages. He needed help. He was going to lose his apartment. He might lose his job. He didn't know what he'd been thinking. When none of that worked, he tried guilt. His mother was sick. He was depressed. He'd made a terrible mistake. I remained silent through it all, maintaining the boundaries I'd set. The only time I broke my no-contact rule was to send a simple text. "Return my spare apartment key to the landlord by 5 p.m. today, or I'll change the locks and send you the bill." The key was returned within the hour. 3 days later, the final piece fell into place. My cousin connected me with a friend who worked at Jason's company. Apparently, Jason and Amber had both been called into HR after their relationship came to light. It violated company policy for employees in their respective positions. Amber had been reassigned to a different department. Jason had been placed on probation for this and for some concerning expense report discrepancies that had recently come to light. Justice, it seemed, came in many forms. I filed a formal report with the credit card company about the charges Jason had made over the years, providing evidence that they were made under false pretenses. It probably wouldn't get my money back, but it would create a record of his behavior, and that felt important somehow. I also consulted with a lawyer about my options for recovering some of what I'd lost, though I knew the chances were slim. Money was just money after all. My dignity and self-respect were worth far more. A week into the breakup, I realized I hadn't cried in days. The pain was still there, a dull ache beneath my ribs, but it was no longer consuming. In its place was a quiet determination to rebuild, to learn from this experience without becoming bitter. I promised myself that I wouldn't let Jason's betrayal define me or shape my future relationships. Trust would come harder next time, but it would come. I refused to let him take that from me, too. 6 months have passed since that text message blew up my life. I'm writing this from my new apartment across town, smaller than the old one, but entirely mine. The car? I sold it 2 months ago. Couldn't stand looking at it in the parking lot. A daily reminder of my biggest financial mistake. The money helped pay down the loan, and I'm slowly rebuilding my savings. As for Jason, karma works in mysterious ways. He lost his job a month after our breakup. Those expense report discrepancies turned out to be actual fraud. Amber dumped him when she discovered he was still messaging Rebecca, and at least 2 other women. Last I heard from mutual friends, he moved back in with his parents in Ohio, his reputation in our industry thoroughly destroyed. He still occasionally sends emails to my work address. I blocked his number, claiming he's changed, that he realizes what he lost, that he wants to make amends. I never respond. Some bridges aren't meant to be rebuilt. The funniest part? About a month ago, Jason showed up at my workplace again. Security recognized him and stopped him before he could reach my floor, but he left behind an envelope with my name on it. Inside was a check for $1,000, a pitiful fraction of what he owes me, and a note saying this was just the beginning of his repayment plan, asking if we could talk about starting fresh. I considered tearing up the check, but instead, I deposited it and donated the full amount to a financial literacy program for women. The perfect ending to an imperfect chapter. Not everything about this experience was negative. I've learned to recognize red flags I once ignored. I've built stronger friendships with people who stood by me, including, surprisingly, Amber, who turned out to be a victim just like me. Most importantly, I've learned that while trust is precious, self-trust is priceless. I'll never again ignore my instincts to please someone else. Sometimes people ask if I regret buying that car. I tell them no. Expensive as it was, it taught me a lesson worth far more than $28,000. That no one will value you if you don't value yourself first. I won't make the same mistake twice. If you're reading this and seeing parallels to your own relationship, please know you're not alone. Financial abuse is real, insidious, and often disguised as love. And if you're wondering whether I did the right thing by taking the car back, well, what would you have done? Was I petty? Or was I simply reclaiming what was rightfully mine? I've made my peace with my decisions, but I'm curious about your thoughts. After all, sometimes the best revenge isn't plotting or scheming. It's living well and letting people destroy themselves.